Hey everyone, welcome back to your favorite revenue podcast. I'm your host, Ross Rich, and we have a very special guest today. We have Beau Brooks, who is the Global VP of both sales and customer success at Teamwork. Thanks so much for making the time today.
Hey, Russ, good to see you. I'm excited to be here. Let's dive in.
Amazing. Well, before we get into some of your top tricks for operationalizing deal excellence, you must know me because yeah, a couple of them are definitely things that I love to talk about. But before we get into that, maybe so the audience gets to know you a bit more, let's talk about your kind of journey to revenue leadership. How did you stumble upon the gig in sales and CS? I'm guessing not every kid wakes up and wants to be either an astronaut or a sales leader. So yeah, how did you find your way into leadership?
Hopefully, I can give you a different one than you usually hear. So I will blame my journey on Bill Clinton.
Okay.
I actually was accepted to college to go study software engineering at the University of Colorado in Boulder. But the summer before I went to a government camp where I met Bill Clinton the same way he met John F. Kennedy. And that repositioned my pursuit into politics and maybe law school. And as commonly happens, I got out of the army and got a job in sales. And the rest is history. Was a strong seller, was moved into management where I was terrible at it, had to figure out how to do it. And over the course of a few years and a lot of mistakes, figured out how to be a revenue leader. So thank you, former President Bill Clinton.
That is definitely a very unique one. I've yet to hear the Bill Clinton shout out and politics involved, but I have seen some top revenue leaders and sellers come from either the service or teaching. I feel like those are the two, if I were to have to say two spaces where some of the best sellers and sales leaders are coming from, wildly enough, those are kind of the two spaces. I don't know if you feel the same way.
That's probably true. I throw the wrinkle. My mom was an elementary school teacher for 25 years. So I grew up in that space as well. I do love to teach. I think, and I agree with you, anybody who comes from that world where you have to be able to relate to all different kinds of personalities and understand how people best learn, not only to help train sellers, but how to train buyers as well, because
Mm.
everybody's got a different personality. So I completely agree. I love it when we see educators, former educators moving into this space. They bring so much value.
Totally, totally. Well, maybe a question before, just on kind of your journey and your experience as a revenue leader before we get onto some of the operationalizing deal excellence pieces. What do you find the most challenging part when it comes to leading a revenue org and not just sales, but also sounds like both sales and customer success?
Yeah, I would classify it as a bigger problem. It's just alignment across
Mm,
all the different departments inside of an organization and funneling that into a digestible way that sales can understand the mission that we're on, how we should talk about it. We do a
mm,
lot of work at the executive level, talking to customers, but also external research to understand what messages are going to resonate, what the product market fit is evolving towards, and then distilling that down into a way that not only do people hear it, but they internalize it and then can repeat it to customers in a meaningful way. All that stuff is really hard, and getting people organized and aligned, and not like we would all have to admit there are environments where sales and marketing, sales and product, we have challenges in how we interact with each other sometimes. So getting over that as well, just the alignment, the sheer challenge of getting that done is the biggest challenge I've seen.
interesting. It's so curious that I feel like in the last probably 30 days, I haven't heard revenue leaders speak more about the importance of messaging and positioning and really nailing that ICP and product market fit. It feels like there's kind of this going into 2024, this kind of focus on alignment of like who are our best customers, and that narrow focus. Is that kind of been a thing that's been really big for teamwork going into this year? And kind of curious to hear maybe a bit of the why behind that.
Uh, Sorry, can we redo that again? I totally lost my train
Oh,
of thought.
all good.
I was ready to go and then lost it.
Totally. So yeah, basically like seeing folks kind of refocus on a more narrow ICP product market fit, really nailing the messaging, positioning from leadership down. I've never seen such a groundswell of investment from senior leadership around this. And I'm just curious to hear maybe, what's driving that at Teamwork, because I'm hearing it from almost every CRO senior leader in the revenue organization, like in the last 30 days, more than like my whole entire career put together. So I'm kind of curious to hear what's driving that at Teamwork?
Yeah, we're no exception at teamwork.com. We've actually gone, I would argue, even harder than some of the other companies out there. We've actually pivoted away from some business lines that historically that we worked very close with and kind of built go to market around and said, no, this is exactly where our ICP is. We've crystallized behind it. We started to do more work with partners so that our internal teams can actually focus very deliberately on that ICP and have gotten laser focused. Everybody says that. So big buzzword, laser focused. But we're no exception. And I think the strategy there that works so well that we're excited about is you remove all the other distractions, right? We're not having to do concentration shifting within the sales team on, all right, what type of customer I'm talking to on this next call? How do I need to position the product differently? We want every call to be as similar as possible so that we get very strong at how we talk to those ICPs, what we show them, how we build and dig for pain through the discovery process. As focused as we can be on that, I think the more success we're going to have throughout the year. So it is a trend that you're seeing for sure. And we're living.
Love it. Well, maybe that's the perfect transition to, on the show, we like to talk about things that people can take away after listening in to really take back to their team. And I think your first one is probably my favorite, where you just mentioned kind of, that quote unquote pain that we talk a lot about in sales and revenue. You mentioned your top tip as reviewing pain on all internal deal reviews. So yeah, would love to hear what you mean about that and why that's such an important kind of deal execution trait to move forward with.
Yeah, probably to set the stage and just be totally blunt, throughout my career, I've not seen sales leaders do this well. Sales leaders that I've worked for and worked next to. We talk a lot about deal mechanics and what do you have planned? What's the structure they're trying to solve for? But getting to understand what that true pain is one of the most challenging things that a sales rep has to do, because you have to ask uncomfortable questions. I like to tell sellers that the discovery process with a buyer 99% of the time is a smokescreen, because what we're asking to do is a buyer to tell us the things that they're doing wrong or they've done wrong or they've ignored. And nobody likes to do that. Nobody likes to talk about the things that they do wrong. So getting a salesperson to understand how to ask those sequential questions in a manner that makes the buyer uncomfortable, but not so uncomfortable they won't be honest with you. It was a light bulb moment for me in my career when we were on with a pretty large sports organization with the CTO. And I got to say, we showed the same feature about 3 times and he kept asking about it. And finally, the rep and I looked at each other and we turned to the customer and said, there's something you're not telling us. And we can't help you until you actually tell us what's going on. And he let out this audible sigh and said, you're right. Actually got in trouble because I didn't take care of this thing. And now I'm trying to make sure I take care of this thing. And once we do that, we could go more direct to the problem. And that internalized for me over the last 10 years of when I'm in a deal review with a salesperson, as a sales manager, a sales leader, one of the first things I talk about is pain. And I would probably say half the time, the rep and I talk about why that's not pain. What they've discovered is actually just a problem that's manifesting in some other pain that we have to push harder to understand. If a buyer is talking to 3 different companies and evaluating a product or software to go to, they're getting all the same questions from those 3 different companies. If we can be the company that asks those very challenging pain questions to get them to reveal the uncomfortable truth that they don't really want to share, but it's the problem they want to solve, our win rate goes through the roof. So on every single deal review, and one of the first fields we look at in the pipeline visualization tool inside CRM is that. What's the pain? What have you documented? What are you still working on discovering? And do you actually have pain? And the more you ask that question of a salesperson, they start to think about it on calls every time. All right, do I have that right pain? What do I not know? Because it's really difficult to get right.
I love that. And would another, would you kind of call pain another word, like the real why behind why they would make a change, right? Like, what's the reason? Not like, oh, this thing is slow or inefficient. It's like, what does that mean? Like, how is that kind of, why would you get fired from that? Or how are you going to miss your goals based on it?
Yeah, you're exactly right. I know one of your recent guests, Doug Landis, talked about this, about understand your buyer's why, right? It becomes rote because as sales leaders, we talk about this a lot, but it's true. I think it's the most difficult thing for a salesperson to do. So salespeople listening to the podcast, focus as much of your time on getting good at this, and everything else will start to fall into line. There's a vulnerability aspect, right? When you actually do get to the pain is like the way that it impacts me personally, as we talked about it in Sandler growing up in sales. Once you can get somebody to admit that, it changes the dynamic of your relationship, because all of a sudden I've told you my deep, dark secret. Now we have this cosmic connection that we want to fix it together. Versus if I'm just telling you, yeah, our billing rates are not great, or our utilization on our team is not good, which we hear a good amount of teamwork. Yeah, that's a problem. And we can show you with a product how we solve it. But until I understand, like, you're afraid you're going to lose your job because utilization rates have dipped well below industry standards and CEOs starting to ask questions, now we're at a different level.
Totally. I love that. And I like your, maybe as a takeaway, you mentioned, it's requiring your customers to be vulnerable. Well, the only way to do that is for you as a rep to kind of put everything out there, right? And not just be this hard charging seller, but, to be honest and upfront. And I think that's what a lot of people, like you're saying, kind of are challenged to do. That's very, very hard to do as a seller, right?
And maybe it comes more natural to an enterprise seller. But if you're an SMB or a mid-market seller, your deal velocity goes a bit quicker. So you've got to get to this stuff faster in order to keep up with whoever the competition is that you're up against. So it's a skill set that takes a lot of practice. And one of the cliches is get comfortable with being uncomfortable. I think asking pain questions is living in that moment, right? It is very awkward to ask, like, what are you not telling me that I need to know in order to help you solve this problem? Sounds silly, but my daughter's 12, and we love watching House, where the brilliant doctor that is an immunologist and has to discover. And last night, one of the families did not tell Dr. House that they had adopted their son. And he couldn't solve the problem because he didn't actually know what the true genesis was of his history. And once they discovered that fact through all kind of like 45 minutes of discovery, they were able to solve the problem fast. So that's a perfect
I love that
TV
analogy.
personification of what we deal with in sales in pain discovery.
Totally. That's a great analogy. Well, shifting things to your next tip, you mentioned making deal stage progress crystal clear. So shifting from maybe some of the buyer stuff and understanding their why to the internal sales process. What do you mean by making deal stage progression crystal clear?
Right. As sales leaders, usually when you come in, either inherit one or you build one, but it's the 5 to 8 sales stages that you're going to carry a deal through. That sellers are going to progress a deal through. We see these things get crystallized at the leadership level, and we make decisions about what they're called and what the conversion rates are. Oftentimes, it's what we use for forecasting. But the reps a lot of times get left in the dust because they don't have a perfect definition of, right, what does the buyer specifically need to admit to me or tell me in the stage for me to know that I've accomplished what's needed in order to move it forward. To me, this is one of the big difference makers that a sales leader can make, is spending the difficult time. I've felt this before with myself and with other sales leaders as we work on this. It is uncomfortable to make this as black and white as possible, because as a sales leader, you're having to make difficult decisions of, okay, what exactly does it mean to move into a negotiating stage inside the funnel? And if we can define exactly what that looks like, sure, there's always a bit of gray, but it takes the guesswork out of the seller's mind. Here's the things I need to know. So when we talk about in pain questioning and in funnel progression, if there are difficult questions or uncomfortable questions you have to ask, but you have to ask them in order to capture that information, whether it's through MEDDIC or whatever type of discovery methodology you use, it makes it so much easier. And that compounds then, right? Because then forecasting gets a lot easier. Deal reviews get a lot easier. I know at Teamwork and at past roles, when I've done this, when we get into forecasting calls with the team, we can ask very specific questions. All right, this deal is here. We typically see that it takes 40 days from this point for a deal to close, but you're forecasting it to close by the end of the month. Explain that to me.
Yeah.
And if they don't have the things in place to justify it, they can't do it. But oftentimes they can. And we see that the deal is pacing much faster because the rep is doing a great job. So by crystallizing this, sharing it with the team, the hard work is done up front, but then it makes the subsequent conversations and the things that the rep has to do so much easier. And there's just less guesswork in it. And like, to be honest, this is one of those things I was terrible at as an early sales leader because I didn't define these things. So
Mhm.
when we would talk about deals in a deal review, the reps would have all kinds of either rose-colored glasses or they were being very pessimistic on whether the customer was a good fit or not. But we didn't have the criteria to actually define that. So now once we've defined it, a rep and I can almost have a conversation without even needing to talk about what's going on with a deal because it's black and white.
Totally. Yeah. It's one of those things where it's very counterintuitive. Almost the more clear you are on some of the operational stuff, the more you can focus on the customer, because then it's kind of like, oh, that's in the background. Everyone knows on the team, the seller, the sales leader, like we can focus on moving the deal forward because we know exactly where it is because we have the shared understanding. But a lot of people think about it as like, oh, like you're not really obsessed with the customer if you're spending so much time thinking about your stages, but it's almost the opposite. It's almost when you actually nail that stuff, you can really focus on how to nail the customer engagement.
Yeah, it keeps me on my toes as a sales leader. I swear the team likes to test me on purpose, but they'll come to me with a deal that's a bit opaque, and they'll say, "All right, we're thinking about putting it here. Do you think we should put it here?" And I have to immediately go, "All right, what are the criteria for being in that specific stage?" And I need to make sure that I answer correctly because they're going to test me. Well, wait a minute, you said yeah we had to have a conversation already in place with the decision maker or scheduled in order to be in the stage, but I don't have that. Like, why are you letting me put it there? So you get tested, but it keeps me accountable as a sales leader to clear design and understanding of what we're doing.
Totally, totally. And the one of the last tips that you had there, which I also really liked from a learning perspective, is running team level call reviews. Why is that so important?
Uh, so truth be told, I stole this from Mark Roberge from his days at HubSpot, and now I know he talks about it a lot when he consults with sales teams. But one, this triangulates from leadership on down what we want to see. So what I mean by this is you get the entire sales team on a call, and we pick a call to review, and we go through and benchmark what does good look like, what does bad look like. The way that I like to structure these things is you select two reps ahead of time to listen to the call. One prepares positive feedback of what went well in the call. One prepares constructive feedback for the call. For anybody that takes this and runs with it, you have to really push people to do the constructive because they will start every comment with, this call went really well, but here's what I would share, right? There's always a but, right? It's like a poop sandwich, as we like to call it. But this creates broad alignment with the team on what good looks like. And as sales leaders, as enablement, we can make decisions on what call we want to listen to and what area of the sales process we want to develop the team on. And we run that. Also, once you get the team into a cadence, we'll invite in other departments on an open invite. Marketing can join, product can join, executive leadership can join, and then it really does get broad alignment across the organization on how we talk to customers. So I talked at the very beginning about getting alignment. This can help a lot by bringing in leaders on the marketing side or on product marketing as we think about how should we be talking about these things. What do we need to develop on the website to make sure we're answering this question that keeps coming up from a customer? Also, removing bad habits. If anybody works in Gong or any other kind of call intelligence, just pulling up the filler words that people use on calls and putting that in a public forum, people get shocked by how many times they said or like, or I mean, or and it can be developmental for the entire team here. We do it in a fun way. We try and enjoy the time together, but we try and do it on a weekly basis across the organization. We've got a team both in Europe and here, so once a month we do it with everybody. But each office runs their own call review on a weekly basis, and it's very important for getting alignment within the team on what good looks like.
Yeah, I love that. I love that phrase. I was actually going to circle back to it, but you ended with it is I think a lot of people assume, a lot of leaders assume that their team understands what their bar is and their standard and what good looks like at the company. But it's one of the first things that I was, trying to learn as a leader moving from a sales rep to starting a court is if you're not repeating yourself, if you're not consistently showing what good looks like and what bad looks like in those areas of improvement, it's just they're focused on their deals. They're focused on their pipeline, on hitting their number, their quota, whatever's going on in their life. They're not as obsessed with you at your standards. So I think that's really helpful, communicating that consistently on a weekly basis, not, once a month, here's some, quarterly kickoff or annual kickoff, and here's the gold standard. It needs to be on that weekly basis to build a culture and standard around that, right?
It does. It makes then one-on-one conversations easier too, because you can reference back, hey, we focused on this for the last 2 call reviews. How's that going in your calls? And do targeted listening as you're in a one-on-one basis as well, or one-on-one meetings as well.
Totally. Well, you had a bonus 4th tip for us. We usually ask for 3, but this must be something you're passionate about if you added it as the bonus. So if you don't mind sharing, kind of the coaching piece, which is not unsurprising based on kind of what I've seen you share on LinkedIn.
Yeah, hopefully I'm breaking a record now that I get 4. Maybe I don't know if I'm the first person or not, but I did it. So I feel like this is a superpower that I have that I learned actually from leaders I've had in the past, is constantly asking your team the question, what do you think? At Teamwork, it's actually called getting bowed, which is silly. They tease me that I've become a verb, but the intention behind it is I'm the leader, and I've seen this throughout my career. And we've got sales directors as well, where the team will come to them with a question of how should I deal with this customer? What should I do next on this deal? And they want us to give them the answer of what to do next, rather than building that critical thinking motion of, okay, here's what I know. Here's maybe what I think I should do. As a leader, I'm going to talk about that. What do you think you should do? Rather than me just giving you the answer of what I think you should do. So this takes a lot of practice and conditioning, but getting into the habit of whenever a question comes to you, before you answer, just give it, hey, what do you think we should do? And they'll roll their eyes for the first 10 times you do it, but then you start to hear those questions less often, because they'll come and say, hey, here's the situation. This is what I'm thinking about doing. What do you think? And then we have much more engaging discussions about what we should do. But and probably 8, 9 times out of 10, the salesperson knows the right answer. They just want the validation from leadership of they should do this thing, right? So that's my tip 3.5 is build the motion of asking, what do you think?
When do you think is the right time to do that? And when's the right time to be directive, right? It's really, really important to know the difference, or it might be really frustrating both to the person that you're asking as well as yourself if you're not going to get kind of the right outcome. So I'm curious to hear in your mind, like, when's the time to be directive and when's the time to be kind of curious?
Yep. That's a great question. There's 2 things that I would call out. One, if you're going to adopt this type of a leadership style, the first thing I do with my sales leaders is say, I want you to understand that you have my permission to make mistakes. As long as when a mistake is made, when we're asked about it, you can give a very thoughtful reasoning as to why you did it. So they have the permission then just to think creatively and solve problems on their own. And then also you have to have a vulnerable leadership style where a salesperson or a sales leader can come to you and say, look, I know I should come to you with an answer, but I honestly don't know. And I can't get frustrated or mad about that. And there's those moments now with the team where they say, hey, I'm really not sure what to do. And that has to be celebrated. Like, I'm glad you're asking a difficult question and comfortable enough to tell me that you don't know. It takes some time to get there. But when it comes to decisions, I'd say when it comes to decisions that are harder to walk back, and like Reid Hoffman and others have talked about these, most decisions that you make inside of a startup SaaS company, you can reverse course on pretty easily. If it's a decision that is tough to pull back, then it's about getting more directive in your approach to responding to the rep. When it comes to things like contract negotiation, right, and getting into deeper pricing mechanics that maybe a salesperson doesn't have as much experience with and can leverage your experience, that's where getting more directive becomes important.
Totally. Yeah, that's something I've struggled with is, there's a right way to do things. And yes, you want to move as fast as possible as a startup, but you also want to, like you're saying, condition your team to trust their instincts and be able to do it, or it's not going to be scalable. And how do you kind of walk the line of like, when's the right time to, have that moment for learning and kind of the right culture, but when's the right time to get shit done and, to make the thing happen in the right way. So it's always a challenge.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you've seen it when you're scaling a startup, particularly as the top or one of the top couple of people. You need stretch, right? You need bandwidth from your team. And that a lot of times comes from trusting them to make good decisions and coaching them to make good decisions. but then they don't have to come to you every time. So it really allows a startup to scale faster when you build that into your culture, because decisions will get made faster. There's less back and forth or waiting. One thing I see all the time is waiting for an upcoming meeting in order to ask a question. So you're delaying a decision up to a week because you're just waiting for FaceTime. That kills organizations. The ability to move faster and trust your people. In reality, there's not that many decisions that, if made incorrectly, are going to do that much damage to the organization, to the impact that it has on your time, say, as the CEO, to get things done faster, or the head of sales to get things done faster.
Totally. That's a good way to look at it. Well, just to quickly recap the kind of 3.5 tips that we talked through. One, reviewing the pain on all deal reviews, which means, getting to the real why, the personal, whether it's the Sandler or the level 3 or whatever you want to call it, like getting to the real reason of why someone make a decision is really important and requires vulnerability from both the rep and the buyer. Number 2, making deal stage progression crystal clear. What are the objective outcomes that need to be true, so you can kind of have better conversations internally and help your reps out. 3, running team level calls, not just talking about the good, but also the bad. So we kind of build a gold standard for what great looks like and repeat that over and over and over again. And then last, kind of training your team around what do you think, and getting bowed, and kind of training them to come with recommendations. I like that, kind of making a more proactive culture around decision making, instead of just kind of deferring to the leaders who, like you said, kind of bandwidth is everything there. So love those. Well, to wrap things up, we're going to do the usual rapid fire questions. So we're going to ask you both for 1 word or 1 sentence answers to a handful of questions. Are you ready?
Let's go.
Awesome. Well, first one, tricky one. What do you think the main reason most teams miss their ARR targets?
The obvious answer is failure to get the pain.
I love it.
But I'll go with challenged alignment between marketing, product, and sales.
Yeah, that's been it's a very hot topic these days. I'm sure you have a lot to choose from, but what's your favorite resource related to revenue leadership? Could be a book, a podcast, a course.
I will do a human. I'm a big John McMahon fan, so Qualified Sales Leader, and also their podcast. Yeah, he's right behind you. Their Revenue Builders podcast is excellent.
Yeah.
So he's the oracle.
Love that one. Yes, I've never felt more seen or heard than reading that book and listening to their podcast. Love it. Number 1 challenge moving into 2024 for revenue leaders.
Yeah, shameless plug for Accord. So getting to the ultimate decision maker inside of an organization. Over the last year, we've seen all these shadow decision makers come out, where at the 11th hour they can jump in and say no. Getting to those shadow decision makers.
Yeah, the stakeholder management, account planning type stuff. Yes, that is not the easiest to retrain a whole team around and kind of set that standard for. I love it. Favorite segment to sell into: SMB, mid-market, or enterprise?
Mid-market. Hedging my bets here, but mid-market, you still get to win pretty frequently, so you get that dopamine hit, but there's complexity to the deals, and it makes them a lot of fun.
Totally. And similar one, this might be a hard one. Sales, CS, or marketing? Which one is most important to a revenue organization?
Marketing. As of the taping of this, we're a week away from the Super Bowl. I'd say marketing is generally the quarterback, and sales and CS, we're carrying the ball. So marketing's got to be calling the plays and making sure we're oriented in the right direction.
Totally. Best way to unplug from the demands of leadership?
I'm a trail runner, so 10 to 20 miles on the trails in Colorado is the right way to unplug.
10 to 20 miles. Wow, I think I'm dead after that, but that is impressive. Well, Beau, this was awesome. I feel like I got a lot of takeaways for our team to go back, and we've been talking a lot about getting to the real why and pain, and I think this was a helpful reflection of maybe asking our team and myself to be a bit more vulnerable so we can ask that of our customers. That's my big takeaway, but appreciate you taking time out of the busy schedule to share this with the community. And if you haven't checked out teamwork.com, or feel free to reach out to Beau. He's sharing some awesome tips on LinkedIn around revenue leadership. So appreciate the time, man.
Yeah, please connect. That'd be great.
Awesome.
Thanks very much, Ross. This has been fun.